Hello, yes, my name is Denys, and I will talk about the pgstat-monitor cooler extension for Postgres monitoring. It's actually not my talk. Ibrar supposed to be here and talk about it. He is the main author of pgstat-monitor, and he knows tons better PostgreSQL as he is long time with this community. But unfortunately, due to the COVID restriction, he cannot travel here. So. Also, the co-author of this presentation is Peter. He was speaking here yesterday about MySQL performance, and he helped me also preparing for that, because I am not that proficient in the databases as they are. My name is Denys Kondratenk. I'm engineering manager in Percona. I joined recently, like 8 months ago. And I'm doing monitoring. I'm working on the Percona monitoring and management project. Before that, I was working as mostly a storage expert in different areas. So I'm based in Nuremberg. That's why I'm actually doing this talk instead of Ibrar. And I was working in SUSE before on the Ceph project, on the storage project. And before that, in Seagate for last year. I had a monitoring background, actually, between my embedded experience as engineer. I switched to HPC, and there in Massive Solutions, like small startup in Ukraine, I was doing monitoring for the HPC market and for big HPC clusters in somewhere in Russia. I think that was a Lomonosov high-performance computer. So a little bit about me. So what is Percona? Percona cares a lot about your performance of the database. And they are quite a big, and we are quite a big experts in that. I'm trying to keep up and be expert, but still. And we have discovered that actually the most common reason for the bad performance of the database are queries. And that's where we're trying to figure out how we can monitor databases better, so we can figure out what kind of queries, what kind of users, what kind of applications causing the problem in the database. That leads us to why we have created this extension and how this extension works. So, currently, PG statements, it's kind of sampling of the data. So it represents what currently happens in the database, and you read this and analyze. The problem with that is between the reads which you perform, there could be some jitter or problem, and it's not really representable what is going on currently and what have gone wrong in the last 6 seconds or something while you were reading the data. And that's why we took a different approach for pgstat-monitor. So we actually taking the event count inside the extension. So it's always monitoring every and each query and what happens in database as the hook for the Postgres, and counts in the time sampling buckets inside the extension. So we do not miss anything. It could be a risk if in case of too much queries, too much data is going on, but it's quite tiny extension, and we believe it doesn't provide too much overhead. So pgstat-monitor is taking this approach of event counting inside the Postgres. And we gather a lot of data from the Postgres. As I said, this organized the time buckets. So that's number of time buckets are configurable, how much time in one bucket, how many buckets you want. And it's there for high fidelity statistic, what is going on, like to not miss any query, or how much time it take, how much resources it took. We also gather additional information comparing to pgstat-monitor. It's multi-dimensional statistic, for example, client IP, application name. So you can find out what's going on with query, where it comes from, what kind of IP address, what kind of application causing this issue. So that's also a cool extension of pgstat-monitor, because it provides much more monitoring data for you to triage and figure out what is going wrong with queries and databases and tables. We also not just taking the successful queries, but also those maybe took much time to wait in the to complete or something, but they returned the error, which also can affect the performance of the database and also latency of response to application. So you can find out such queries as well by capturing the additional information about the state. Relations between the different tables, how the query relates to other functions as well as other tables, and how it's going on from the top level to down level as well. That's all present in pgstat monitor, extending the pgstat statements. Much more information how different time distribution, so on the query in the histogram representation. So where this query was executed, how often, in what time timestamps it was executed most of the time, and when that query didn't execute as well. So it's a really nice representation when it happened. So if this query happened too often. Plan information, query hierarchy, all of that is extensive, present in the pgstat monitor to help you to triage and find out what is going on with this query and how it's executed, how it's planned. pgstat monitor, it's open source project, so everyone can contribute to it. It's located on GitHub, and you can easily build yourself, install it from the packages, and actually also contribute. We would like to have more community contributing to pgstat monitor or cloning it, and maybe creating similar extension for other databases on its base. You can install it from sources. You can install it from the packages, as well as from the Postgres extension network. There are extensions over there, so there is the commands how you can install it. To enable this extension, so this extension needs memory allocation, so it should be enabled before the Postgres starts, or you need to restart the Postgres if you have enabled this extension. That's how you can do it. So first of all, how you can enable it, it's in the config file as the preload library, and then enable it in the system as well. You need to restart, as I said, the PostgreSQL. I wrote the different. Your service probably will have different name in Debian or RPM distributions. So you need to figure out how you do it yourself, and then you just need to enable it with the create command. There are a couple of versions available. One is SQL, another one you just query the pgstat monitor version inside, and it will report you what is current version installed in the system. Just a standard SQL query. Comparing to the pgstat monitor, it provides quite more different statistics and quite more different columns and fields. So you can see here, just as an example, what kind of additional information you can gather from the pgstat monitor. pgstat monitor has settings. I don't expect you to read this. It's just example that you also can query all the settings available, and it will report you the name of it, what is the default values, what it does mean this, and what is maximum minimum over there, so you can tune them as you wish. The buckets. So yes, this is a sense of these pgstat monitors, how that's organized. So it's configurable how many buckets you have, and you can see here that it will gather over time the events on the bucket, and jump to next one, and doing this, while it does this, you can query these buckets and see what has happened for this time frame, and go in rounds and rounds, so it will just push the data out when it's overfills and go again. There are a lot of things you can see that. So this is how you use the pgstat monitor in CLI. You probably would like to build some kind of tools around it, so you can query and then represent it in some kind of monitoring system. You can do that, and I will show you how it's done later. But there is the example how you, even without any monitoring tool, you can easily query it in a Postgres and see what happens inside the database immediately after you enable this extension. So here is the query information where you can see how many calls were done, what query is about, what queries ID. Query ID is important for other fields as well, so you can query where the query ID can gather much more information later. So here we can see that's how many queries, how many calls were done on the for the past period. I can maybe show it in a different way, because like in the presentation it's cool for being on stage, but probably not that cool looking on it. So we have a user guide as well online, where you can find out all of this online information. It's always changing, right? So we add a new statistic, we add in new queries, and there are much more information as well. So as I said, there are parameters, the configurations view that you can see, and you can see the list of the metrics and parameters we have that present in the pgstat monitor, and all kinds of examples what you can query from the pgstat monitor. So query information, connected application details, for example. I don't have it in my slides because it's quite big and I cannot fit it in the slides, but in our user guide in the GitHub you can find out the really nice example how you can query the application, what kind of query it executed, how much time it did later. So you can find out, maybe you have some old applications that shouldn't be in the system, but it's taking a lot of time, taking a lot of calls, and actually slow down the system quite a lot. So you can find out the application name, client IP. That's for sure restricted for the privileges users, so we can restrict that, so you will not show the IP addresses for the average user, but you can find out what kind of application slugs down your system. Timing information, yes, how much time this query took. And executions plan, how this query was executed. That's also, you can see all the information that's provided by pgstat monitor. Metadata is also one of the coolest one of the coolest feature here. So yeah, you can create all different kind of functions and see in much more details what has happened in the system, what kind of application execute, what query, and what exactly have they done. That comes from the comment field gathered by pgstat monitor. So yeah, there are much more with that. For example, we also gather the errors. What kind of queries terminated with errors? You see that's maybe some application gives you a hard time for the database when it's execute too many queries that actually ended up with errors, and you can figure out that by seeing this statistic. Histogram, and this is actually represents the time distribution when the query was executed and how much time. so you can find out when exactly the query slacked down the system. And relations, yes, what kind of tables affected this query, where it was executed. So yeah, go to the GitHub, read the documentation, contribute, and ask the questions in the GitHub page, pgstat monitors. Okay. There's all of these examples I just showed you in GitHub are also available on this presentation, probably will be available on the website. I just showed you it in the GitHub because it's much more convenient. Here is everything is moved around and you cannot present too much information in presentation. Performance metrics, so pgstat monitor do not add much overhead. There is the comparison, I think it was done in the beginning of year. I don't know, I don't have a current data. But they're not much overhead, if at all, by enabling this pgstat monitor extension and how this compares to pgstatement and to the clean system without the extension. So for sure it depends on number of queries you have, so we will allocate some more memory for sure, but it doesn't produce much overhead. And in the end, I'm from PMamp. We have a monitoring system, which we also integrate. So we just query the pgstat monitor extension and represent it in a nice way in Grafana. Maybe let me show that maybe a little bit better. I have a live system here running on Minikube. Maybe I can close it up. So yes, so it's I run some of the queries in the background to test it, and you can see that you can. Yesterday, Peter showed off this interface as well. Like I do not have much load here, but here is the histogram of the load, which right now doesn't have sense because I just showing you the additional statistic for the query, which I showed you by CLI, also available in nice representation in histograms, in the fields, metrics, as well as you can see the examples, tables, it's affected, plan, execution, all of that we have in PMamp. So you can analyze, add this service in the PMamp Postgres service with pgstat monitor extension, and you can see the data in really nice way. Okay. Oops. To add the service in the PMamp, PMamp is also open source project, so you can take the container and run it yourself and contribute on GitHub if you would like to. To enable it in UI, you just add the service and choose what kind of query analytic you want to see. Do you want to see it at all? Do you want to use the pgstat statements, or you have a pgstat monitor enabled, which is enabled by default for Percona distribution for PG monitor or for PostgreSQL? But if you have enabled it in your PostgreSQL, you can select pgstat monitor and it will just connect to it. And if you use the command line, we have agent running on the node, you just can add it with this parameter, query source, pgstat monitor. By default, currently it's pgstat statements, but maybe in the future we'll just default to pgstat monitor. So with this command, you can add the service and it will appear in our Percona monitoring solution. GitHub is there are sources available, but we also take the feedback as the Jira tickets. Please come report any issues you have or what problems you have, any questions in the Jira. We also have forums. It's not listed here, but Jira, Discord, come give you feedback, ideas, maybe what kind of features you would like to get from it, or what you're missing from this extension. I was quite quick because it wasn't my talk, and I haven't talked for a long time in the live conferences. I will take some questions now. Anyone?
Any questions from the audience? What kind of rights do I need for the PostgreSQL database to access the plugin?
Yes, you need, I believe, the admin rights to actually enable it. And for some of the tables, I think you can just enable this extension. For your databases, you can enable this extension with rights you have of, like, yourself. So, but enable the pgstat monitor, you need to have the admin rights.
Any other questions?
Can you please point out some more differences between the pgstat statement and pgstat monitor? Because from what I've seen so far,
yeah,
we need the monitor part, right? For PMM and the integration. Or what am I missing if I just use pgstat state?
Yes, so you do miss, I have a slide here. What do you miss? It's a difference of the statistics. So you will miss all of these. First of all, like buckets, it's how that's pgstat monitor organize the data. It doesn't really matter like for you. But like client IP, plan ID, query plan, top query, application name, relations of this query. All of this is additional information like log level, error ID. I mean, how this query executed. It was with error or without error. All of these metrics are not present in the pgstat monitor. They are only present in pgstat monitor. And the main stuff is not only like what kind of metrics we collect. So you probably can extend pgstat monitor to collect these metrics. It's not a problem. The thing is like how we collect them. So the idea of bucket intervals to collect them inside the pgstat PostgreSQL is completely different from the idea of sampling the data periodically from pgstat monitor. So you can miss some of information. For example, some query executed quite fast, and there were some other queries that actually didn't impact the performance, and you missed it. You just have average between these 5 seconds, what has happened. You don't know which query affected the most the performance. In this kind of event logging, when we log in each event, you can see this query, which impacted the performance, because it's logged in the time bucket and it's saved, and we can see this statistic. But yeah, there are additional metrics as well. You can see the difference between the pgstat statements and pgmonitor.
Any other questions?
One question regarding you showed examples with an application name. Where does it coming from? Do I have to set something on the application which is calling the database, or how is this done?
No idea. I am unfortunately not a Postgres expert, but I believe this comes from the Postgres itself. So it's not a pgstat monitor, like pgstat monitor, just a hook on the event loop on the Postgres, and it collects all the data about this query. And I believe what you're asking for application is somewhere in Postgres. I don't know if it's enabled, how you can enable it. That's unfortunately, I don't know. But I will maybe address your question by bar. If you leave me some contacts or something, I can answer it later. Cool? Thank you.
Anyone else?
Okay.
Well, if there are no other questions,
yep.
Thank you, Denys.
Thank you.